In 400 years, Weymouth has played a very significant role in a lot of the major moments of the American experiment. You have people here that are selfless and devoted to a cause that's much greater than themselves, not just in the people who our streets are named after and our schools are named after, but in the day-to-day lives of people in this community.
I love the community of Weymouth. It's got a bit of everything. It's got a small town feel. It's got kind of the big city feel at the same time.
Everything I needed was down the street. We had baseball fields, basketball courts, we had the hockey rink in the winter. It was just a wonderful place to really grow up.
Location, geography, coastline, etc. You're getting much more of a value in Weymouth than any community around here.
The teaching staff, it's in their heart that every single thing they do every day is really to make education more accessible, exciting, and just better for kids and families.
We're a big town, we're a close-knit town, but we all have our own little separate identities also.
I'm always proud to be from around here and be from Weymouth. People go to work and put on the boots and go provide for the family. I was always taught to, get your hands dirty, and you want something, you gotta work for it, no matter what it is, and I know that's how people are around here.
I really think the pride of this community is because the relationships people have with each other. If someone's down, people pick them up. If there's an event as a fundraiser to support a family, you can't even get in, it's so crowded.
We've been here 49 years, and most of the people in Weymouth either have ties to Weymouth, they've been here for a very long time, they were born here, they stayed. And even if they've moved, they come back.
I think a common joke that we have is everything always comes back to Weymouth. Everything. No matter what you think, there's always some sort of Weymouth connection, and you're just like, here it is again.
You are what your community is, and you are who your people are. And I can't ask for better people than the people in Weymouth.
Our town played a great role in the beginning of our country's history, and it continues today. How do you celebrate a rich history of a town as great as ours?
It's a great opportunity to kind of reinvigorate people's understanding, knowledge, interest in history, and especially in their hometown. And so it's an honor to be the mayor as we are celebrating our 400th.
Turning 400 is a huge milestone for our town. We've had some ups and downs, and we've had some stuff happen in the last 400 years that is not something that you always talk about. However, the sense of pride and community that has grown throughout the years, especially in the last, I would say, 10, 15 years, our goal as an organization was to bring all of those stories together and bring events to the community that focus on family and community and businesses. This legacy project hopefully tells that story of the last 400 years as we go into the future in the next 400 years.
The first English settlers here are sent by a man named Thomas Weston. Weston was the banker for the Pilgrims. He expected to make money off the Pilgrim venture by having the Pilgrims export furs that they would trade with the Indians. He was a hard-pressed businessman. He owed a lot of people money. He was in trouble with the law in England. And so in a desperation move, he decided he'd set up a colony that would do what he had expected the Pilgrims would do. And those were the Western settlers who settled at this place, Wessagusset, the Indian word for the place where the waters meet the rocks.
Unfortunately, that group didn't do the best job of setting down any roots. They just didn't do a good job planning as far as bringing seeds and setting up relationships with the indigenous people that were here.
And then the native people, kind of talked this over among themselves and decided, what are we going to do about this? Standish and his men killed 7 native people. My conclusion was that there was no serious plot to kill all the English people there. It was all talk. Now, it's such a dramatic story that it overshadows the history of Wessagusset as a settlement, which comes 6 months later. English settlers did not understand how cold it was going to be in New England and how harsh living conditions were going to be here.
The herring have been an important food source, starting with the Massachusetts tribe of Indians who lived here long before the settlers arrived. They used them for food and also in their vegetable gardens to make everything grow better. When the settlers got here in the 1630s, they wouldn't have made the first winter if they didn't have the herring to eat.
The third major settlement group that came was the 1635, the Reverend Hull group. And it was named not necessarily for the fact that there were settlers from the town of Weymouth, but that was where those settlers embarked from.
They were rural farmers. They wanted the chance to own their own land. And they were pretty spectacularly successful in this.
One of the unique things about Weymouth, you find it in a few communities, but we don't really have a central town green and town common that you will find in some other communities.
There were outlines of the 4 villages by 1790.
The first one was the initial settlement in North Weymouth.
I hung out in North Weymouth. I grew up on Sunrise Drive. Great Eska Park was a huge part of my life growing up. As a matter of fact, it still is today. I still take walks up there and stuff. But down at Julia Road, where Great Eska Park is, there's a tennis court there. And over the winter, the firemen used to come down and fill it up so it would freeze over. That's kind of my first taste of putting on skates and learning the game. And then from there, I started to show interest, and my mom used to take me to public skating all the time, whether it was here or in Quincy at the Shea Rink, and that's kind of where I got my start. Weymouth, when I was growing up, was a big hockey town, and I had a lot of guys that lived in my neighborhood that actually played at Weymouth North, so I would always be that young kid that would hitch a ride to their games. I would say a lot of the guys on the Weymouth North teams back in those days were kind of guys that I looked up to. I still remember the names till this day, and that's kind of what got me interested more into hockey. I had a lot of really good teachers at Weymouth that I still remember, fond memories of a lot of them, but my high school coach, Bob Donovan, probably had the biggest impact on me. I think he was a biology teacher at Weymouth North. I think he was the one that really started to push me, even as I was, the leading scorer on the team. If I made mistakes, he made sure that I knew about them, and that's really how you improve. My era here, we didn't lose too many games, but when we lost one, we heard about it. So I think he was the guy that really pushed me to try to get better, and I'd thank him for that. And I have thanked him for that before, because if you don't have someone that's going to push you, you're not going to get better. And I just think he pushed me at the right time to kind of get me over the hump. Everybody, I think, growing up wants to play for their country in some form. And the chance that I got to play for the U.S. was phenomenal. It was a great experience. Just from the pre-tour over to the Olympics, how well we did. We lost in the bronze medal game, but just a lot of the support I got from the town of Weymouth was huge. I don't think there was too many people from Weymouth that were going to the Olympics back in those days. So I think it was an exciting time, not only for me, but for the town of Weymouth, and it was a phenomenal experience for me. It's every kid's dream to play in the NHL, but your first game was probably one of my fondest memories. And to score a goal in my first game in overtime was pretty cool. And back in those days, we didn't have internet, and I had to call my parents at like midnight their time to tell them what happened, because nothing was on TV back then either. So it was different times, but it was an exciting time, and I'd say that's one of my fondest memories playing in the NHL. But another one was that same year I came back to play the Bruins for the first time. The support I got from the town of Weymouth was unbelievable. If you went to any establishment on Causeway Street that night, you found a lot of Weymouth people with Weymouth pride, and I think that tells you a lot about Weymouth, that they had one of their guys coming home to play the Bruins, and they were there to support them. And I guess my last one would be my first game playing for the Bruins. To put that Spoke B on and play for the Bruins for the first time was a pretty phenomenal event for me.
Abigail Adams is the second First Lady, and she's also the mother to one of our presidents. She was an integral part to women's rights and a very strong leader, and she's from Weymouth, which is just crazy, but the history that comes along with her is something to be celebrated.
It was in this home that Abigail and her sisters and brother were raised. And so she was born here, raised here, educated here, learned how to run a household, and eventually was married from the parlor. She and John were wed from here. I think Abigail had a really unique mind, and she was curious and creative, and she was smart. It was from Weymouth that Abigail began corresponding with John when they began courting one another. And we have some of the early letters that they wrote, what we call the courtship letters. It's because of that correspondence that we know so much about our early American history, about the American Revolution, what some of the ideas and ideals were that were leading up to that time. But I think in looking back, it says a lot about how this home, Weymouth, and the church here formed Abigail.
My dad, Ed, back in the 90s, got a group of business people together, business leaders in Quincy, and they started a group called the Quincy Partnership. Their whole idea was to highlight all of this hidden history that was in Quincy. So one of the things they did is they commissioned statues from the sculptor Lloyd Lilly, and one of the statues was John Adams, and then the other statue was Abigail Adams, and she had her hand on her son, John Quincy Adams. The way that my brother and I were raised, you always have to give back to the community that you're a part of. And from my parents' perspective, it always was trying to find ways to highlight what's great about the community and to do something that makes a lasting difference. So maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, when I was getting involved with the Weymouth Chamber of Commerce and I was looking around Weymouth, I noticed that there really wasn't much there to really celebrate Abigail Adams. So I had this kind of fantasy in my head that I would love to see an Abigail Adams statue in the town of Weymouth because that's where she was born, and I just felt like it needed to be there.
He was a really fun guy. He was the life of the party. He played piano, and he had played it professionally at one point when he was younger, and then art, became his love.
One day I just decided to reach out to Lloyd Lilly's family, and I asked them, did they keep the molds to Abigail Adams that made the original statue in Quincy? And luckily they did.
We had started talking about it months ahead of time, and he had various iterations of Abigail, some seated, some standing, and so forth. And he ended up wanting a standing pose. Abigail's left hand initially was on the shoulder of John Quincy Adams. And since John Quincy Adams was not going to be part of this sculpture, we had to decide what to do with that hand. And we came up with a lot of ideas, but his favorite idea was her holding the letter, this famous letter that she sent to her husband when he was in Paris, writing the Constitution, to remember the ladies.
When Abigail was writing, I think we have to think about what the ideas and ideals were at the time. The nation was being formed. This was written in March 1776, so just a few months before the Declaration of Independence. So in that Remember the Ladies, what she was asking for was more equality in economic issues. And one of the things about Abigail is that she was an investor. In that time period, women could not own property if they were married. So anything that Abigail had to do, she needed a male figure in her life. Abigail was always disappointed that she didn't have a formal education, and that was in part in Remember the Ladies. She wished she had better grammar and her penmanship were better. And yet Those were things that did not keep her from writing letters. She still wrote, she still expressed her ideas and ideals.
Like most of these large-scale projects, it takes a long time to get the process rolling. It starts out with the artist's idea and then the object, which can be made in clay, it can be made in wax, plaster. In this case for Abigail, we had an original plaster to work off of. Go to a rubber mold. Rubber mold's catching all the details from the artist. The plaster mother mold on top of the rubber keeps the form. And then once all the rubber molds are done, it moves on to wax. And so in wax, what we're doing is now we're creating another positive. So the wax is pulled from the rubbers. They're sprued, which is just a process that allows for pathways for the metal to eventually get into the piece that we're trying to cast. It goes into our ceramic shell room. We're building up a layer of anywhere between 3/8 of an inch to 1/2 an inch, depending on panel size. Once they're all dipped in ceramic shell, we're putting them in a kiln, firing it like ceramic. Now we have another negative mold of ceramic shell that bronze can get poured into. Once all the metal work is completed, we move on to patina, which really brings the piece to life.
The whole process is incredible. It's going to be a prominent, eye-catching piece that I just hope everyone enjoys, and I hope they understand how important she was, not only to our town and to our state, but to our country.
I think it's really very striking, and I think he would have been thrilled with it. The biggest wish that he had before he passed away was that she would be installed in Weymouth.
She represents, I think, all that we who live here think is the greatness of Weymouth. She is Weymouth's gem.
South Shore Health is one of the largest employers on the South Shore, and it's in our backyard. We're blessed to have an institution not only help us, but the whole Commonwealth of Mass.
In 1922, Dr. George Emerson put his wife on a trolley, if you can imagine that, to deliver a baby in Boston because there was no hospital anywhere nearby to deliver a baby. And he vowed at that point that he would help create a hospital where people could get care much closer to home. The hospital then opened in May of 1922, right on our current campus. And from there, that mission of providing outstanding care locally has been core to this institution. And we've expanded and grown quite a bit since then, but the mission remains. We really appreciate our relationship with the town of Weymouth on many, many levels, from the DPW to the police and fire. They provide extraordinary services, and we greatly appreciate what they do every day.
From childbirth or even before that and planning to have a family, all the way through until the end of life. This is the charity that will touch everyone. It's perfect that an organization like this, the largest community health system in the state, resides right here in the town of Weymouth. We have very shared beliefs, shared ideas into how we go about things. So I think that it's really appropriate that from the standpoint of Weymouth turning 400 is the same time as South Shore Health is turning 100. Those two different milestones converge. And now as we look forward, we know that we must continue to change, we must continue to evolve. We have to make sure we understand what they need, what they want, and what we can do to provide that.
We have a very rich history of military in our town. Our police and fire and EMTs and our veterans are everything to Weymouth, and pretty strong presence in our community on a day-to-day basis. It's never forgotten. Those that serve continue to serve, and those who have paid the ultimate sacrifice.
My name's
Fire Chief Keith Stark. I've been the chief for the past 9 years, been on the Weymouth Fire Department for the past 25 years. I graduated high school in '88, hung around for a couple of years trying to find my way, went in the Navy, so I served my country. I came back to Weymouth after 4.5 years. I'm a licensed plumber and just, been plumbing, and I was bartending and, married, kids, all the stuff, and got on the fire department. It's the best thing that ever happened to me. I am funded for 99 firefighters. Each shift, you have 24 people assigned to each shift. There's 4 shifts, groups 1, 2, 3, and 4. So 24 guys came to work. They all man the engines and the ladders, and they're responding to emergency calls. A lot of them are veterans. Some of them aren't. Some of them are from Weymouth, some of them aren't. I have a fire prevention officer, an assistant fire prevention. I have a training officer, an assistant training officer, and I have a superintendent of fire alarms. So those 5 guys that work every day with me, all good guys, come to work, do their job, help people. We're involved in the community in multiple ways. The Senior Safe program is given annually by the governor. Any senior that's living by themselves or with someone that needs a smoke detector, they sign up through Karen Johnson, and then Karen notifies the union, and then on a certain Saturday in October, a bunch of guys come in and we go out and hang smoke detectors and CO detectors in people's houses that need help with it. We do CPR in the schools. We started that program in 2014, I believe. We became a heart-safe community because of that. We have community people call us for rides to school. The community as a whole, I have a drawer full of thank you letters from citizens of Weymouth that have thanked us for helping out somebody in their family in their time of need. Service, pride, commitment is our motto, and I think the guys do a good job of holding up to that. I'm proud to be from Weymouth.
Starting long before 1902, the town of Weymouth was governed by constables. As time would go on, there was an identified need for a police department. In 1902, they appointed the first police chief in Weymouth. So with that 1902 date is a trigger for the start of the Weymouth Police Department. People always say, why did you want to become a police officer? And and you think, well, there's people that'll go right to the job itself. I like the police cars, I like the power, I like the authority. That was not my primary goal. I just like helping people. It sounds corny, but it's true. Had a lot of great jobs that I enjoyed. Sought out jobs in K9 and motorcycles and my own personal things that I enjoy, so it blended very well together. I stayed in uniform my entire career. There was a joke in the building that if I came in a suit, somebody was getting fired. I retired the start of 2020, and have been with the Weymouth Police Department for close to 38 years.
When I took over from Chief Grimes, I joke, I say I got handed the keys to a Cadillac and all I have to do is drive it, because in the 10 years that he was chief, we came such a long way. I spent my entire youth in the Summer Street area, Pond Meadow Park, played soccer most of my life in Weymouth and in high school, and I had 3 brothers. The only thing attaching us to home was the dinner bell that rang at 5, and if you weren't in the dinner table 15 minutes later, you'd hear about it. I went to college for a while, and during the Operation Desert Storm, I decided to join the Army. And when I got back, I took the civil service exam. I was hired, and I worked my way up the ranks. I've been here for about, I think this is my 28th year.
So in high school, I really knew I wanted to be a police officer, and I went to the Massachusetts State Police Student Trooper Academy. We went away for a whole week at the State Police Academy in New Braintree, and we did a trust game. And it was during one of those trust games where you're on a rope and you're supposed to go from one side to the other. So there's a person over here and a person over here, and the rope only goes so far. So it took teamwork to be able to complete that task. And I remember the other person on the other side was a little nervous, and we helped each other through. And after that moment, I knew I really wanted to go into policing. I really wanted to help people. I was in the patrol division for about 5 years, and then my husband and I got pregnant and had my first child. When I was pregnant, I didn't really want to sit behind a desk and dispatch, and there's nothing wrong with dispatching, but I really wanted to try to do something for the community. I had was a very close relationship with my grandfather, Okie, and I recognized that we didn't have an elder affairs officer anymore. So I asked Chief Grimes if it'd be okay if I started to go and talk with the senior citizen community. It really was a great impact in something that the police department was missing. So during that time, I was able to show the chief how important it was to have a liaison between the police department and the community. I did that role from February 2015 until recently when I got promoted. I am currently the sergeant of the Community Outreach Division, which includes myself and 3 SROs, and those are the school resource officers. I'm a mother of 2 children, 2 dogs, a husband, and when I go home, I'm not, Officer Pompeo or Sergeant Pompeo. I'm Mom, just Jen.
Weymouth is, in my memory, has always been a huge supporter of police and the police department. It really resonated when Sergeant Chesner was killed.
Line of duty deaths are thankfully not a common occurrence. Sadly, more common recently than before. The chief that started in 1902 left, I believe, around 1913. Chief Butler came in 13, and in 1915, he was hit and killed by a drunken driver. Now, think back to 1915, there was probably about a 60-40 split between horse-drawn carriages and carts and whatnot in motor cars, or machines as they referred to them back in 1915, but he was run down by a drunken driver and killed. He's registered with the National Law Enforcement Memorial as the first police officer killed by a drunken driver. And we had an officer, Michael P. Davey, that was killed tragically on August 24th, 2009, working a traffic control position, and was struck by a motorist. Sadly, was fatally injured. Tragic as that is, you would hope there was no intent to kill the officer in that. In this case, it didn't seem to be. It was an elderly operator that mistook the gas for the brake. Chesner's was cold-blooded, and it struck a nerve.
He was a lot of fun. He got into a lot of mischief.
As a typical kid.
He was born on the hottest day in April that record still stands.
Tax day, April 15th.
April 15th. He did well at Weymouth school system, and he went on to Northeastern, and he then graduated as a CJ major, criminal justice, and it was at a time when there were not a lot of criminal justice jobs, and his goal in life was always to become a police officer. He said, the only way I'm ever going to do it is if I go in the service. So he one day came home and told me that he was thinking of signing up for the Army. And I said, well, knowing you as I do, I think you probably already have. And he said, you're right, tell Dad. We worried about him being overseas so much. We hardly slept. We were like maniacs. And when he came home and was going on to Weymouth,
we just relaxed.
Never.
We figured never anything.
He was our Barney Fife.
Figured nothing would ever happen in Weymouth or something. Being Eric, his words to me were, Mom, do you know anything about anything? And I said,
Anything like what? And he said, anything like, was there a shooting in Weymouth? And I said, I don't have any idea. I don't think so. Did Michael work last night? And I said, yeah, he did. But it's 8 o'clock, so his shift's over. I said to him, I told him what it was about and what Eric said and everything. And then 15 minutes maybe went by, and I looked out the window and I saw a state police car.
He was working the midnight to 8 shift. But this call came in for Michael as an erratic operator type call on Main Street. And it would later evolve into somewhat of a on-foot call where the operator left the vehicle after colliding with another one. Officer Chesno was having a dialogue with the individual. The individual was nearby, and as he moved towards the officer, the individual hurled a rock at the officer, struck him in the head, knocking him to the ground, and we believe rendering him unconscious. The individual retrieved his firearm and fired rounds into the officer on the ground.
It's like walking into a wall. Your life could change in 1 second. You just don't know.
When they did, in fact, encounter him, he was still holding the firearm. They ordered it dropped, and one of the officers on scene made the keen observation that the weapon was in lockback, and in gun terms that means the slide is locked to the rear. So they took him to the ground and placed him in custody.
The town, the people,
Everybody.
everybody.
They just put their arms around us in such a big way. It was like, I don't remember a lot of it, but I do remember some of it because we were in shock.
I actually had taken some classes at Northeastern University with Mike. I remember him when he worked at the Beachcomber back in the day. So when that happened, it was life-changing for everyone on this department and everyone in this community.
Michael, by character, he was a great guy, perfect employee. He's one of those guys you wish you could cookie cutter and get a dozen of them when you needed them.
He made us proud. We're proud parents of him. Really, yeah.
Chief Grimes led us through probably the worst time in the history of Weymouth Police. I'm forever grateful to Chief Grimes for that, and I know all of us are.
To see everyone come together, line up poles, along the route from Weymouth to Hanover with, black and blue stripes, and for everyone to come together, the outcry of support and love, it truly showed you how much this community really is, that we can take a tragedy and come together. And I think for that, that's always something that I'll never forget. I don't think anyone in this department will ever forget. One of
The most memorable moments was when the town had everyone up at the high school, and there was a lot of speakers, and it was pretty awesome to see the town come together. Like, that was like the Weymouth that I love.
It's been a journey that I would never wish on anybody, but it's also been a journey that was a huge eye-opener in the fact that there are so many good people out there.
Right.
So many wonderful, wonderful souls.
We're trying to get the bridge on Route 18 named after him, but it's going to be Sergeant Chesna, first responders. Every ambulance that goes over, doctor, every police, fire, that's what we'd like to have, for everybody around.
I think Weymouth's a wonderful place. I don't think I'd find this anywhere else.
They call the people on active duty the 1%. Okay, that's what we call them, okay, because 1% of the people protects the other 99%. So at any one time, there's about 1% of the population that's out there protecting everyone else. Weymouth doubles that percentage of people that serve from the community, which is significant. You know, it's not uncommon to see multiple names from the same family, sometimes serving in the same branch, but often, you know, a little bit of camaraderie and competition going back and forth between the different branches. I remember working with one young lady. She just got out of the Marine Corps and her brother came in a couple weeks later, you know, and he was still in the Army. And it kind of typifies a lot of the families that live here. Libby Field was named after a doctor who, even though he was in his 50s when World War I popped up, he felt such a sense of responsibility that he volunteered as a doctor, and he went down, he was stationed down in Georgia to help, you know, take care of the people that were being inducted for World War I. So it's amazing, you know, the wide spectrum of support that not only the veterans have, but the people that feel that they want to give that way. They're not afraid to commit.
I was in my late 20s. I've been to Germany a couple of times, been to the islands about 9 times. But the first night we went out in France looking for Germans. And one of our men didn't come back. So from that time on, nobody went out alone.
I was in the field most of the time, going around to the various bases and representing our headquarters company, which is located about a mile down the road from MACV headquarters, in behind Tonsunud Air Force Base in downtown Saigon. Most of the things that we were concerned about, I wanted to get home to my 2-month-old baby, so I tried not to take too many chances, but I think one of the most fascinating things, downtown Saigon, all of the Army buses that were moving in and around the city, they all had screens on the doors, screens on the windows, even though, you know, the windows were open all the time. It's a pretty hot area. But it was often they'd be coming up beside you on one of their little rickshaws or something like that. They'd lob a grenade you had to keep your eyes open all the time. It just, you know, you weren't out there with the combat troops going up and down, you know, the swamps. But there was no place that was safe. You were always on edge a little bit, just, you know, trying to have an eyes in the back of your head. Probably saw more things than I should have. Saw the good side and maybe some of the bad sides. Even though I grew up in the city on the housing projects, I thought I learned a lot there. You didn't really learn what was going on until you spent a year in Vietnam.
I just caught the end of the Vietnam era, and it was like one of the maybe second to the last classes at Fort McClellan for Women's Army Corps. From my grandfather down to me, all veterans, all Army. Wah. Basic training was Fort Dix, and active duty was Fort Bragg. My whole time has all been what a small world. It didn't matter where I went. I was all the way in Saudi Arabia, and a manila envelope is blowing across the desert. I look at my co-pilot and I said, we gotta pick that thing up. So we pick it up, and it's a manila envelope, and it's addressed to any soldier. And I said, look at this. It's coming from Bristol Community College. Well, hello. Bristol Community College, out of all the people who's crossing the desert, the hundreds of thousands of people that are crossing the desert, I'm picking it up. I got lucky. Again, out of all the wars, I mean, I got the shortest war. I mean, right after I came home, everybody's over there from going to Afghanistan, and it's up until fairly recent.
Played soccer in college, got my teaching degree, and then I had a gap between when I ended school and, you know, like the fall year. So I joined in January of '01. Before September 11th. 02, 03, that was the build-up for the Iraq War, so I was in that. 2012, 13, I was in Afghanistan. We were actually consolidating to get out of there, which never really happened until last year.
I come from a long family of military. Every guy except one served. And the only reason he didn't serve is because he had a medical disqualification. I was stationed in West Germany with the 2nd Armored Cav. That was my first assignment. I was an intel analyst, German linguist, and so as a result, we had a bunch of guys together that they all had different language capabilities. And we were there during the Iran crisis. And so after I served 4 years, I joined the Army National Guard. And for the next 6 years, I did my weekends, went off to training, did this, did that, and got my degree. Decided, something was missing. I went back full-time Army Guard, and did that for the next 20 years.
You're in there with your buddies, that's a big part of it. Especially drill, you hate going to drill, but you love, once you get there, everyone's there, and it's like you forget about it and you get through it together and have fun.
There was no parades when you get back home. There was no thank you, nice job. You just had to be careful that somebody didn't know you. Were you a baby killer too, or did you do this, or did you do those kinds of things? It was really a tough time. There wasn't very few people that would actually say bad comments to you or yell, but there was, you'd get a dirty look or a quizzical look and that kind of stuff.
You come home and you can't talk to anybody because nobody gets it. You got nothing in common with anybody. You try, and they try, but they have no idea what I'm talking about. So you're just totally lost. Couldn't get a job right away, fill out all the paperwork, maybe try to find a government job. Maybe I'll just go to the dog track. Eventually you settle in, time heals it and you move on.
I remember the kids running up to me, up to the mailbox, and big hugs and hugs. Yeah, it was a great experience.
We've heard some comments from some of the folks that a lot of times when you see and do things in the military, you come back changed a little bit, potentially. Not everybody does, some more than others. We have made great strides through research, Boston University, the home base program, the VAs. The VAs are not what they were 20 years ago, 30 years ago. They are a 5-star organization.
Weymouth is just outstanding to its veterans. They don't forget. Our VSOs, way out of their way to make sure that the veterans are all taken care of. They go above and beyond. Every single one of them that I've ever seen. George, he's unbelievable.
Massachusetts is the only state in the nation that has veteran service officers, or VSO. And every community, whether you're small or large, there is a veteran representative such as myself to assist veterans to understand the benefits that they've earned, help them attain those, and to explain the process that they have to go through in order to get them. They're constantly changing. Our job is to stay aware of what direction they're going in and basically to advise and assist any veteran in town. This is a tremendous community for veterans. It has a sense of camaraderie, tradition. The people here are just tremendous, and they never stopped serving their country. Maybe they don't wear a uniform any longer, but they still serve their community and they still serve the greater good. I don't try to brag about a lot of things, but the sense of history here is tremendous.
Growing up, we had a lot of kids in our neighborhood. We were always outside playing sports. There was hockey, football, basketball, wiffle ball, you name it, we played it. My thing was hockey, and that's all I just wanted to do every day. And you have friends and cousins. I had a big family who loved hockey. My father played, his brother played, my uncle. I have a couple of cousins, Tony Monty and Bobby Sheehan, who both played in the NHL. So it was just kind of in the blood, I guess. There's been a lot of different coaches and teachers that have impacted me in a positive way. You learn a little something different from each person you encounter and how they affect you. But if I had to say a coach, it would have to be my dad. He coached me from when I first started hockey all the way up until when I went to high school. To have a guy who goes out to work very early in the morning, all day, and bus hump to provide for our family, and then only to come home, rush home, and then go out to hockey practice and volunteer in that way. You realize it more and more when you get older and the sacrifices they make. Boston's a great sports city, and you feel that even in the suburbs, half hour away. When the Bruins won the Stanley Cup 2011, I think I was just drafted, and I was drafted by the San Jose Sharks, so I was in their system, but still gonna go to college next year. And the Bruins win the Stanley Cup, and it was like I was a fan, but I felt kind of awkward, am I supposed to cheer for them right now because I'm technically San Jose Sharks property? But it was very special to see, because that's what you want when you're a fan growing up. You want your home team to win. When I got traded, because I was with Minnesota Wild, and we were supposed to be heading to a trip. I think we were supposed to go to New York. We're in Minnesota. I had an appointment somewhere. I go to my appointment, and then I get out, and I have a missed call and text from my GM from the Wild. And right then I knew I was getting traded. He says, I can't tell you exactly where you're going because it's not finalized yet, but I think you'll be okay with it, is what he said. It's funny because people think we have like the inside scoop on things, what happens with the team and all this. I'm just like a fan. I learn stuff on Twitter all the time. Just went home, refreshed Twitter, put on the NHL Network, and tried to talk to anyone, text anyone, hey, my agent, my buddies, my dad, does anyone know where I'm going? And until finally you see someone break on Twitter who's someone kind of reliable, and okay, I think he knows what he's talking about. Hopefully he's right. And Boston came up, and I didn't want to get too excited because I want the official, hey, you're going to Boston, but it was tough to hold in the excitement that was going through my body. And then I got a call from Bergeron and Chara, and they were playing that night too, and they both called me. So two guys I grew up watching. It was a pretty special moment for them to welcome me to the team, and I was pumped to play for a team they were on a tear at the time, and they're going to be a playoff contender and original six franchise, and playing in Boston, but also I could see my family more, my grandmother, and that's what really makes it. So it's kind of the best of both worlds, with family close and playing for a great organization. A lot of times you get asked, throughout the years, what's your favorite hockey memory, and people are going to think I talk about the NHL, and I always say Weymouth High School Super 8. That year we made our run, and for me at the time I was a freshman, so kind of getting my feet wet into high school, and all these emotions, nerves, to have that team and go on that run, have the whole town behind us, you get chills talking about it. I think it's really good to come back for the kids and go to hockey clinics around here, or interact with kids, different events around Weymouth, and you talk to the kids and say like, hey, I was a kid just like you, and there was nothing special about me. I'm just from here, and I grew up in a regular family, normal family. We work for things, and if you want to play hockey and go do something, or whatever you want to do, you can do it. I did it. You can't forget what it's like to be a kid, and how you can affect them.
I grew up on Westlake Drive, which is behind BJ's Wholesale Club. My parents moved to Weymouth back in the 60s. My father's from Ireland. My mother's from Mission Hill, so they moved to Weymouth in the 60s like a lot of people did. I was born here, and Westlake Drive has always been a tight-knit neighborhood, and I spent most of my life there, and I now live around the corner on Middle Street, right on Whitman's Pond, where it all started 52 years ago. Physically in life, I went about a quarter mile to where I am now. Sports was a big part of my upbringing. I was in the first team when Weymouth Youth Soccer first started. Back then, Weymouth Youth Soccer had 2 teams. The entire league was 2 teams. Every Sunday, we played the same team. And now look at it, it's really grown. And I'm back in the fields again, coaching my daughter who plays, and my son will be playing one of these days. On Sundays, we went to church at St. Albert's, and the rest of the week we were either playing sports or in Cub Scouts. So I had a great upbringing. I was very fortunate. I was born in 1969, so I'm a kid of the 70s and 80s. So when I was growing up, in my neighborhood was always the Keldors Mall, which is McDonald's there, and there was an arcade there called Replay. So I grew up going to the arcade, playing sports around the fields around Westlake Drive, going to Escapade, which was like a dance club back then. I see some people shaking their head. So I'd walk up to Escapade, which was a local dance club for young kids. We'd go up there on a Sunday at 2 o'clock and dance till 6 o'clock. Then we had to leave because we became 21 and older after that. And then spending time on Whitman's Pond, where I live now. So I grew up going fishing there, and I still do that today with my kids, which is kind of interesting to be back where it all started. So it's great to see my family and my kids continue with what I did, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. My parents have played the biggest impact on my life. They instilled in me a work ethic, to be persistent, to work hard, but to mostly and always do the right thing. Always give back to the people that are around you. They've instilled in me that life is bigger than just my life in itself. My parents were always active in the community, and they always reminded me that when you get older to do the same thing. My life has been an extension of what I learned as a kid from my parents, from my close-knit neighborhood, from the parents that I grew up with around me, my friends' parents, who I have to say also raised me. It's not about being the richest person, it's about just being that person that does the best that they can, and it's okay to fail, but you always want to give back to your community, work hard, and realize that life is more than just you. I've spent my entire life here. I think when my day is done, when I retire and look back at my career, it's going to be the thousands of people that I've been able to meet along the way, and all the people that I've been able to help.
My grandfather, Joe Sarney, had a diner in Weymouth Landing that he took over after World War II, late 40s. For some strange reason, I got a shoe shine kit from Santa Claus one year. It wasn't on the wish list, but somehow I got a shoe shine kit. And I said, what am I gonna do with a shoe shine kit? So I went Saturdays with the shoe shine kit to my grandfather's diner and solicited men to shine their shoes that were hanging around there. Back in those days, the guys were still wearing wingtips on the weekend and, slacks and things, and I would shine shoes for 50 cents a shine. And the only guy I really remember tipping me was the local state representative, Bob Ambler. He'd give me $1. And I was very entrepreneurial in those days. I did a little of everything, but some years later when I decided to run for state senate, I found myself facing off in the general election against Bob Ambler, and it was kind of awkward and interesting for my grandparents, who came to the first debate we had, and Bob Ambler hugging my grandmother, and next thing I know, I'm having a slugfest with Bob Ambler and ended up beating him, and I became the state senator, which of course then segued to me becoming mayor.
Knollwood Circle is where I was born and raised. It's one of the sort of quintessential neighborhoods in Weymouth where you have a circle where there was a lot of young kids around the same age. We were able to play wiffle ball in the street and just grow up in really sort of that idyllic sort of environment. And that's what I think a lot of people, their experience in childhoods in Weymouth are like that. I'd say some of the most impactful people in my life, Fred and Dodie Dosenberg, who I think are two of the most selfless people. They had trouble starting a family, so they adopted. And then from there, they were actually able to have 2 children of their own. One of them tragically died, he took his life. And then they redevoted themselves to making sure that, they raise awareness for Good Samaritans. And they're just incredible people. Some of the most impressionable periods of your life, you look at people and how much impact that they have. You don't know then, but you know now. Having them in my life has led to me being a much better person.
One of the things that was always really exciting about leading a community like Weymouth, especially the teaching staff in Weymouth, is that during the time I was superintendent, about half of the faculty in Weymouth Public Schools had gone to Weymouth Public Schools at some point themselves growing up, and about a third had kids themselves that were in the Weymouth Public Schools. So a real community that was not just incredibly dedicated to teaching and learning and the success of our kids, but were personally invested in lots of different ways.
It was a wonderful town to grow up in. It was a place where football was paramount. Everybody on Saturday afternoons, that's where you went, to the football game. And the town would shut down. There was not a night when I was working that I wasn't out, going to a game, going to a play.
When I became superintendent in 2004, it was a very exciting time in the school district. We were about to open the new high school in that September, and then also create this new entity of these two middle schools from grade 5 through 8. So it truly was a new beginning for the community, and one that I really cherished and was pleased to be able to serve at that point in time.
As I went through the school system, I had some phenomenal teachers that really made a difference in my life. And I think coming from a home that had an educator in it, I saw the value, the power, and just the passion that's in education from people that really feel as though it's their calling. I just love the fact that I was able to be in a system, not only where I grew up or where I taught, but where my own kids are. Every single moment that I was in the role, I loved it. Were there hard decisions? Absolutely. Were there difficult times? Absolutely. But I know every night when I put my head in the pillow, I made the best choices for the kids.
I grew up in Southbridge, Massachusetts, and as a young adult, we moved to Weymouth, my wife and I, right at the time we were starting our family. So although I'm not a townie, my kids have grown up here since the time they were born. They were both born here, and they've gone through the schools, and they're both presently at the high school.
I didn't know much about Weymouth, to be honest with you, before I accepted the position. I knew enough about it as to why I would want to apply to it, but I've just been amazed about the wonderful opportunities that Weymouth has presented me, but the wonderful opportunities that we can present to our children inside this school district. It is a phenomenal town, phenomenal community. We got phenomenal schools. It's an honor and a privilege to work with kids and to help them grow to be their best selves.
One of the things I was really fortunate to experience when I was here is I worked with Mary Jo Livingstone, who was the superintendent who succeeded Mr. Rull. And she was here for 5 years and was a remarkable person, a tremendous leader, and just a kind, compassionate person. And losing her at such a young age was a real setback for the community. But I think we carried on her legacy of learning and of loving children. And I think that was something that motivated me, and I know it certainly motivated the people who have come after me. Our kids are growing up in a very multicultural, diverse, fast-paced world. Technology is driving so many of these decisions.
A large amount of our population, the top 3 languages are Portuguese, Spanish, and Arabic. And I think in the long run, our kids are going to be better community members, better citizens, because they are going to school with a more diverse population and they're being exposed to experiences that I know I didn't have when I was in school, and I had a great education, but they're leaving ready for whether it be the college world or whether it be work, going into some sort of arm of the military. They are prepared, and I think that that is something that Weymouth's gotten better at over time.
I'm so excited for the young people of Weymouth to be able to walk into these doors and to be able to learn in this tremendous facility. You know, I had the pleasure of being a part of the team that helped kick off the statement of interest that went to the Mass School Buildings Authority, to be able to do a feasibility study to start this important journey of the creation of the Maria Weston Chapman School, and just really excited that students are going to be able to have a world-class education and a world-class facility.
What the opportunities this building provides with regard to the educational opportunities is really how it started. You know, the building is really just pretty wrapping paper on an education plan, and when you walk in here, it's the learning spaces that are what matter.
I think it's opportunities, it's innovation, but it's aspiration. You can see your dreams in front of your very eyes. And it's going to force us as educators throughout the district to start educating our children for space like this. There is so much opportunity that presents itself here.
this is going to leave a legacy, I think, for everyone that had something to do with this amazing project for years and years to come, especially the theater. I am so proud of what the theater is going to be, and I know that our theater arts programming and fine and performing arts, they're going to grow because of it.
Weymouth has really said the arts are an important part of kids' education. It's what brings people together. It teaches empathy, it teaches introspection, which in today's shrinking global world are two of the most important things that we could possibly have.
It's our time to give our students the best opportunity to become their best selves. This is once in a lifetime for some of these kids. These are once in a lifetime moments in time. And what you say or do literally can change someone's life.
In 2022, we had numerous events, and a lot of them were focused around community and family, whether it was a Food Truck Friday, whether it was a Village Festival, whether it was the Water Lantern Festival. These events were meaningful, and I hope they continue for years to come.
the incredible improvements that have taken place in this community, from our parks and our fields, the schools, the grounds at the Emery Estate, places for people to gather. If the last 10 years is any indication of the upward trajectory of what this town has to offer, I can only imagine what it's going to be like 20, 25, 50, or even 100 years from now.
I worked for UPS for 38 years, got to meet so many wonderful families, watched young families have children, watched them grow up and have children, and even watched some of those children grow up and have children. I always said that job had a fourth benefit, which was the people.
When you kind of touch outside the town and you see that not everybody experiences life through the same lens that you experience it through, you realize how lucky you are to be surrounded by these neighborhoods of support and community and kindness. That makes me all the more grateful to live here and to have parents that really planted their feet in the community.
The people of Weymouth are so loving and supportive. I remember when I was pregnant, everyone would be like, how are you feeling? How's everything going? We're gonna go through all of the firsts with him. You know, we were already doing that as a couple. Now it's gonna be like the first time Barrett goes to school, the first time he makes his first friend and joins his first sports team.
I hope the future of Weymouth continues along the same path that it has been going the past year. Weymouth 400 has really brought so many people together and so many businesses together.
People don't realize how rich our community is with the history that we have here. So being able to bring that detail out to the community gives me great pride and satisfaction.
You know, really what I've learned through this experience, you know, over the last, 3 to 4 years has been really the passion and the pride, that residents of Weymouth have growing up in the town and now raising their own families in the town.
What do I hope Weymouth holds for the future? Giving the same opportunities to the younger kids of this generation to explore and do whatever they set their minds to.
I want to see as many people be able to share the experience of being in Weymouth and living in Weymouth as much as we can. And to be able to see the development and the growth of our town is exciting. That being said, we do want to see the neighborhoods stay neighborhoods and make sure that it's still a comfortable place for families to grow. But the future is bright, no matter how you slice it.
We're all invested in this. So for me to say, hey, can I help with something for our town that benefits our town, that benefits my family, that my business can give back to, that I can give back to, and my 2 boys can see me putting that back into, and that pride, that's where the story continues.
They say you can take the kid out of Weymouth, but you can't take the Weymouth out of the kid.
This is my town.
This is my town.
This is my home.
This is my home.
This is Weymouth.